One aspect of SQL Server that I want to point out that can be a little confusing just based on the terminology, and I'll use it in this course, and that is the concept of default and named instances. Now, a default instance is when I just simply install SQL Server onto a computer. That instance of SQL Server takes on the name of the computer. In this example, and I'm going to go to registered servers, and I'll show you. When I first installed SQL Server, the name of this particular machine is LSBRG. That's a shortened version of Leesburg. Now, that happened automatically. I don't get a choice in that default name. SQL just assumes that name. Now, as soon as that installation is complete, I can kick off the setup program again or put the SQL disk back in the disk player and let it auto run and start a new install. And this time on the install I can tell it that it's a named instance, and I give the SQL Server a name, and from that point on there's actually two SQL databases running on this box, and the second one has whatever name I gave it, and the way I reference it is LSBRG \mark. Now over here in the Object Explorer, in the Management tool, and you'll see this a little bit later on, notice I can expand and see that. I can also connect to another database engine, and notice I can choose in the server name that named instance and connect to it, and now I can see both of them. So I can see both SQL servers on this one box. Now that's a default and a named instance. Now let me show you this right quick. I've put my SQL Server disk back in. I'm just going to kick it off here. And if I kick off an install, you will notice that it's going to start the install process. I already have two instances of SQL Server on this box. I have the default instance, and then I have the named instance, which is Mark. Okay, so let's kick off the installation. And you're going to see it go through the standard process for installing SQL Server. And yes, I agree to all that. And it's going to configure some components for me here. This won't take but just a second. Now, named instances are great for situations where you have legal requirements, where data has to be separated from other data and it can't be commingled. If you have different security requirements, if you have different collation and sorts and that sort of thing. So anytime you need two separate databases, keep in mind you don't have to have two separate boxes and all that sort of thing. You can run these on one box. Now do keep in mind that if you try to run two SQL Server instances on the same box, you are going to have disk contention and memory issues if you're trying to run two full-blown systems. But what a lot of people will do is run one as a kind of a test server, development server, and that sort of thing. So notice here that my installation is going along just like normal. It's running all of its checks. Windows installer is kicking off. It's preparing to install. And notice we're simply going through the install process again, just like before. No part of this will look any different than the original installation that you went through, and I'll say OK to all that. And notice components to install. I just want the database services. That's it. If I wanted my sample database, I could choose the workstation components, books online, and so forth, but I won't do that. Now, notice right here, this is the difference. Default instance or named instance. I want to do a named instance, and so I could call this one Bob. And if I continue from here, I can see I'll have another SQL Server named Bob. Now notice I can check my installed instances, and there's my basic default installation. There's my named instances already there. And so now I can go back and choose and add another named instance if I'd like of Bob. So that's how to do a named instance, and that's what it is. You will hear about them quite a bit, and I just wanted to give you a clear picture of what's going on with named instances.